Hi guys, and welcome back to my channel. So glad to have you here. January has been an extremely busy month for me, and it came with a whole bunch of unexpected challenges, tragedy, and other problems. On the last day of December in 2025, I was treated to this glorious sunset. And while I planned to have a very low-key celebration, that was not to be. What I thought was a really cute moment with the horses actually turned out to be my horse colicking. And I think the only saving grace in this is the fact that I've dealt with horses that have colicked before, so I didn't immediately freak out or not notice. But I ended up having to call my vet at 11:45 at night, only for them to show up at 12:03, and I go, "Happy New Year! Sorry I'm ruining your night." But I'd really like it if my horse didn't die. Fortunately, I have planned for disasters like this, and I had an enclosed space to put him in isolation where he couldn't be eating grass and doing things willy-nilly. But yeah, that was really scary and it really sucked. But the nice thing is, I have lots of projects to work on that are close to him so I can keep an eye on things going down. So that weekend, which was like 2 days after he colicked, we continued on the horse shelter, trying to get the roof done. So here you can see us kind of working on the center beam. The next day was a little bit nicer out and we had more help getting all of the trusses in place and nailing everything together. We actually managed to get some plywood on top of the roof as well this day. So this is what we ended up after the weekend, and then I began the series of projects that I needed to do. Since our little tent kept blowing away in the wind, I decided to just put a hay shed directly beside the big horse shelter. Now the hay shed is mostly built out of pallets and cheap reused wood, but I did decide to try shingling for the first time in my life and figure out how to kind of make that work the way I wanted it to. Next up was building more feeders because my hay tube feeder is falling apart and I'm not paying $500 for a slow feeder. And so my first pallet feeder was made. Now while my first feeder turned out really sturdy, the design of it ended up using a lot more wood than I would have wanted to, so I decided to build a different kind of feeder with the nicer pallets that I had laying around. Now, unfortunately for me, I didn't actually plan super well for the first one of these that I built. I kind of had an idea of how I was going to do it, but once I realized that the pallets were too small and I would actually have to be cutting them in half, I wouldn't have actually dragged them all the way into the field, nailed stuff to them, and then cut them in half. I would have cut them in half way where my saw is actually at. Because unfortunately, out in the horse field, my skill saw does not reach with even the farthest of extension cords. So I had to saw these things in half by hand because I was too lazy to go drag them back down across the field to cut them in half. And my hope was that I could just nail them all together and then have them be a pallet-sized feeder, but that just didn't work out the way I wanted it to. So after doing all that extra work, then I decided to use some of my brain cells to actually figure out how to put this thing together so that it would be efficient, easy, and, well, free. The second pallet feeder is about twice the size of my original feeder, and it can hold up to 2 square bales. I ended up reinforcing the ever-loving crap out of it to make sure that my box was actually a box-shaped box, which is harder than you might think. I also wanted to add in a hinged gate onto this pallet feeder, but in hindsight, I don't think I will be doing that for my other pallet feeder of the same design that I'll be making. Because the hinges and it was so hard to make it fit properly. Especially since I'm still doing most of my projects in the dark, with all the coyotes.
You guys are weird.
So I ended up going with 2" by 2" grid in the bottom, which I will probably change out for hardware cloth because I found too much of the hay ended up sifting through onto the floor, and that is not the goal of a feeder, so yay for me. This whole year has been weirdly nice out, and also concerningly warm, so I did get the chance to play with my horse a little bit now and again. Yay! also a brand new barn kitten for me to pet and play with and love on.
Yes, yes. Who needs to be on time to work when I could do this?
So after building a little hay shed, 2 feeders, and a few other things, it was time to work on my tack shed, which is also a box-shaped, hopefully, box that requires having a roof, unfortunately. My tack shed I am trying to build as cheaply as possible. So far in this project, I've spent about maybe $100, maybe $120. And most of that expense comes down to like $50 in windows, because I just wanted a nice window to look at the horses from the main floor, and then one window up top to kind of let in some light into my storage area rather than having to put a light up there as well. Although I might end up putting a light in the second little space just in case it gets too dark in there.
There's like 6 of them. Oh, where are they going? Oh, Shrimp, you're all alone now. So sad. So sad.
So this is where we got to yesterday. I've got the window kind of sort of in there. It's only on one hinge right now, which sucks. But let's go inside. So this was gonna be my tack room. So we've got a ladder that goes up through the roof, so I can store blankets and other crap up there that I don't use every day. And then I'm kind of thinking about putting a little mini Murphy bed here with shelving. So if a horse colics or whatever, then he can stay in here. And then it's just, the door's gonna go over. And then you can see the horses through the window, which I will clean because it's filthy right now. And then there's a little mini deck. And then that planter is going to get put together right there. And I'll put a bunch of flowers in it for the spring. So, not so bad so far. Just going to put on the roof today, hopefully. One of my other smaller projects was building a mounting block. So this mounting block cost me $20, and that's just because I bought grip strips. Otherwise, the entire thing is built out of scrap 2x12s, a couple 2x4s, and one little piece of 2x6 that I had hanging around. So it ended up being pretty sturdy, and I made sure that it was disassemblable because that sucker is heavy. And sometimes just having a little one-step box that I can stand on to braid and groom or whatever is kind of handy to have rather than having a 2-foot mounting block. And because of how nice the weather was, I actually got to try it out and ride my horse around a little bit, because that is the amount of effort that I'm putting in at this point. But it's winter, I don't have an arena, and he's not gonna like magically disappear all of his skills just because I don't ride or do very much for now, other than feeding and looking after them. So after I got the top of the tack shed kind of attached and reinforced, it was time for a door, which I ended up building out of scrap 2x6 and a couple 2x8s that I had as well that were just ancient and really good for nothing else. For the door, I ended up laying all of my planks side by side, and then using the 1x4s from the pallets to kind of attach everything together because they aren't grooved, so they won't just slide into place. And I didn't have any plywood. Otherwise, I would have done a different style of door. So either way, this door ended up being free and very heavy duty, so it's going to last probably a very long time without too much issues. Now, for the door, I bought some really nice, pretty hinges because I do intend to leave the wood of the door, and I wanted it to look really nice. For as little money as possible. I could have bought cheaper, crappier hinges, but I ended up buying nicer ones, which came with screws to put on, that were fairly heavy duty. Once I got the door attached to the shed, I then started in on the Murphy bed. Because when Torin colicked, I had to walk down in the dark several times during the night just to check on him in the middle of the night, and I would like to not do that, so having an emergency place to stay and be near the horses is kind of really handy. So I figured I would just build this bed frame out of scrap 2x8s that I had that weren't very good for any other use. Okay, so this is where we're at the end of the day. We have a door, which I will have to unfortunately rip this direction because it's just like a 1/4 inch too large. Like, it does close, but it is just slightly too large, which sucks. But it is on there, and it opens and closes, and it's the right height, so I can't complain about that. It opens outwards because this is a small space. And I see out my window. We have most of the roof done, and then I've put in this, it's a little hard to see on the camera, but this is a 2x8, and then it's 2x8 the whole way around. This will be a Murphy bed, so a bed will come down and then down like that for emergency situations, or just having people over would be nice. We have a floor, which I need to put some flooring on and finish running the wires for the electric setup, because it's solar panels, solar powered, lights in here. Probably gonna get another one of these. These are pretty great, and they only cost me $30, whereas those ones are way stronger, but they're more expensive, so that kind of sucks. And then I can side the whole thing probably next week or throughout the week. Finish off this little deck space, and then put up some shelves and saddle racks and all of that. But the roof height has been determined and kind of knocked together, so I just need to go buy more 2x4s, unfortunately. So we're almost free of the 2x4s. And then it's just siding, which is everything that is back there. All of that. Yay! Unfortunately, because it is winter, I am still doing most of the work for these kinds of projects in the dark. Which kind of sucks, but it has been freakishly warm this winter, and actually it's kind of really scary because normally you wouldn't be seeing bees or frogs this early, and a lot of the trees that normally bloom later in the spring are blooming now. So, in terms of building stuff, I am kind of grateful, but at the same time, deeply alarmed. So, as February comes into focus, this is where we are at as of January 31st. We have a most shelter done. Yay! 2 feeders are finished, and the horses are eating out of them as I record this. I have put a roof on and finished a lot of the framing for my tack shed. I have built a second tarp shelter for all of my hay. And that is where we're at. Thank you so much for watching, and if you could hit some buttons, that really helps my content spread further. And I will see you guys in the next one. Bye!